Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Donnybrook. Great to have you with us. It's the third week in a row that we're socially distancing, and we've got lots to talk about, as you know. Thank you so much for inviting us into your living rooms. Well, it's kind of like Hollywood Squares, so first we'd like to welcome Nanette Fabre, a.k.a. Wendy Wiese, who's the news director of the Big 550 KTRS, along with Mr. Charlie Weaver, who, of course, is Bill McClellan from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. We sometimes call him Ray Hartmann, but he looks more like Paul Lynn to me from the Riverfront Times and the Big 550 KTRS.
Oh, you're in trouble.
And, of course, Wally Cox, a.k.a. Alvin Reid from 97.1. Killing the show. Who was that, Alvin?
That was Ruben the cat.
Hey, Ruben, welcome. We'll send you the usual fee.
I'm trying to keep him in cat food, so he had to work too.
I do want to express the happiest of birthdays today to Sophia Moreno, who you saw last week in the public service announcement for the 9 Network Educational Toolkit. And Wendy, you better remind me, how old is Sophia today?
This many.
8 years old. I think I saw
8. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
8.
Well, Ray Hartmann, you're going to be socially distancing yourself from the governor, Mike Parson, or he'll be socially distancing himself from you if he reads this week's Riverfront Times. You think that Mike Parson is doing as little or maybe even less when it comes to COVID-19 than any other governor in the country.
Kansas City Star just reported that he was in a race to the bottom with, I want to say, the governors of three other states. I think it was Nebraska, Iowa, and Tennessee, as governors who have done the least about this. It is absolutely unacceptable on every level that there's not a statewide shelter-at-home order like there is, and there's also not even an order for businesses. This is, it's over 80% of the American public are living under shelter-at-home orders, and this virus doesn't know any borders.
Well, this is Missouri, Ray. I mean, I was going to say this is the kind of guy we elect, but then again, we didn't elect Governor Parson. But this is the sort of thing that appeals to a lot of people in Missouri. There's, nobody's going to tell us what to do. And I mean, I think there's great swaths of the state that still think this is, if not a hoax, real media hype, and they're proud of our governor.
I think it's to the point now where it's inexcusable in just the numbers themselves. And if you look at where the cases are, like Ray was saying, there throughout the state, including St. Charles, where you have 2 people that have passed away and 21 others have it in a senior residence. And yet, you have a county executive there who, did not want to dictate which businesses close and which don't.
But he did.
Yes, he did. He did.
Yeah.
This is no fooling around. And why our state, once again, has to be amongst the bottom. I will throw in Oklahoma there, too. I talked to my brother-in-law last night, and you could still go to a Mexican restaurant near him, sit down, have dinner. I think it's not like that in Tulsa and, whatever county Tulsa's in, but the rest of the state's up for grabs, too. And apparently people from Joplin are just flowing over the state line and just taking whatever they have with them.
Well, he must not want to, he must not be interested in re-election, because most of the people I know who would have voted for him are among the ones who are the most irate about a lack of aggression and aggressiveness on the part of the governor.
Well, I will say I agree generally with what everybody has said. I think Ruben has actually done more when it comes to COVID-19 than the governor. However, you got to admit that not all counties are the same. And you go to Rockland County, New York, where they have about 1,500 cases per 100,000. Go to the city of St. Louis, where it's 43 cases. You go to Jasper County in Missouri, it's about 4 cases.
Well,
Charlie,
there's a problem.
Hang on, let me just say, if I may, you know, in Jasper County, they are doing more socially distancing now, and they always have been, than we are under the lockdown. For example, their parks are never as crowded as our Forest Park. They don't have farmers markets because they are farmers. As a matter of fact, farmers markets are exempt in St. Louis County, for example, along with like taxi cabs. Now, taxi cabs might be important to some, but you can't tell me that getting into a taxi cab in St. Louis County prevents you from getting COVID-19.
That patchwork approach that you're talking about, really, or that you seem to be talking about, is deadly, because the yokels who live in St. Louis, who don't think that there's something to be afraid of, who will not ever be told what to do by anybody, you have to have a uniform message. And that's what the governor is completely unaware of. Everybody has to be, in my mind, to my mind, everybody has to be following the same set of rules.
Charlie, can I say something? The thing you're really missing here, and it's a big problem, is there isn't enough testing anywhere, but particularly outstate.
I agree.
So what happens is, for example, Kathy Swan, who's a state rep, who's a nurse of all things from Cape Girardeau, got up and talked about how she didn't want to hear about a bunch of doomsday stuff. Well, let me tell you something. At the time she did that on March 19th, there were 0 cases in Cape Girardeau. And let's hope to God it doesn't get worse. There's now 15. And if the curve grows there like it does everywhere else, guess what? The only thing that's going to bring us together is the people in rural Missouri are going to have to come to St. Louis for medical care because we didn't expand Medicaid expansion. Half the rural hospitals are closed. It is a big
Charlie, if I could say again, I'm really not defending the governor. I mean, I heard Bill Gates, who is the smartest guy I've ever heard, say that this only works if everybody does it. So I'm not saying everybody shouldn't be doing it. I'm just saying that this is what you have to expect in Missouri. This is the governor, and a lot of people agree with him.
You know what
I'm telling you. I mean, people are saying. Let me say something about this governor, and maybe the governor of New York, for example. Weren't you a little surprised when, and everybody, even Wendy the other week, said that maybe Governor Cuomo should be, nominated on the Democratic ticket this year? And yeah, he's getting a lot of praise. But the governor of New York waited till yesterday to close down playgrounds, whereas St. Louis Mayor Lyda Krewson did it last Friday.
But they have a shelter in place. They can't go. I mean, I'm surprised that it took him that long to get around to that. But to me, that would. I think he has other things on his to-do list.
No, he doesn't. Not at this point. That is his most important job, as he knows.
Well, I don't think you cannot question what the governor of New York has done.
New York
if he's 48 hours behind Lyda Krewson, that's one thing.
Charlie,
but also,
for real.
New York is ground zero, Charlie.
And New York is also.
How did it take them that long to close the playground?
They're not allowed. Okay. Nobody's allowed to go outside. I mean,
yes, they can. They can exercise outside.
Okay.
Charlie.
New York is different than other places, Charlie, in that, seriously, a playground is all most kids in the heart of New York have. Okay. And you take that away,
Charlie,
there's no yard, there's no park.
Okay.
Charlie, can I say one other thing?
I'm not doing this for the sake of argument. In St. Louis, as you know, you can go to a liquor store. You can get recreational pot in Illinois, and you can also you can go to a B&B. A bed and breakfast is exempt in St. Louis County. So don't sit in judgment of Adair County where they don't have any bed and breakfasts.
Well, let me say something about this too.
I didn't know about the bed and breakfast.
Last night, Charlie, on our show last night, I happened to have Mike Sutherland, who's the parks director on from the state of Missouri. He had an interesting perspective. So it's not just urban rural. When they just closed Castlewood Park. I think they should be closing all the parks with a stay-at-home order. It's not his doing. It's up to Parson. But like Illinois has, all of Illinois' parks are closed, and people are streaming over here from Illinois to go to Missouri parks. But he closed Castlewood Park, and I asked him about this when he closed Elephant Rocks Park, which is in rural Missouri. He says it was about the same response, about 50-50, that the people in that region were pretty much happy that not to have people bringing, they weren't looking for tourism right now. And so it's not quite clearly urban rural. But the point is, people in rural Missouri are more likely to really through no fault of their own, because they're not being tested, to underestimate this virus. And this is a virus for the whole country.
Okay, Ray, do you want to close Forest Park? I mean, I'm walking in Forest Park every single day. I'm careful. But
eventually, Bill, right? I would not be surprised. They have to look at how much they dropped.
I agree with you, Wendy. I mean, it might happen.
Yeah.
And the answer is, at least people have to practice the social distancing.
That's exactly right. And I agree with that.
I think the Parks Department in the state is doing as well as it could under the circumstances. The point is, you got to practice social distancing.
That's right.
And the pediatricians will tell you kids don't do that.
If I might, let's go to Wendy on this next topic, which, Wendy, maybe you can explain to me something that I thought was really unusual this past week, when former Governor Greitens showed up at a photo op with Fox 2, KMOX's Kevin Killeen, private photographer Susie Gorman, taking his photos unloading masks, which he had kind of donated through the St. Louis Fire Department Foundation to the fire department. Apparently, he had lined up the sponsors to buy the masks. Where he got them, I don't know. And then there were photos of him unloading them. And then he did the same thing, the next day in Kansas City to the police department. He would not answer any questions. And of course, this is the governor who 2 years ago resigned out under a cloud of controversy. What the heck is going on?
And don't forget exercise equipment under the cloud of controversy and exercise equipment. I have no idea, but I think one of the quickest ways to ensure that you become a political non-entity and a cultural pariah, and we've seen this at every level, state, federal, White House, and now I think we're seeing it with former Governor Greitens. Anybody who uses the pandemic as a campaign rally or anything that looks remotely like a campaign rally, I think will incur the wrath of the voters at the ballot box. I'm sure that there are a few out there who maybe have some genetic predisposition or something, but who are moved by it. But the timing at this moment to look like you're grandstanding, to my estimation, is political death. And if I were advising him on becoming a phoenix who's trying to rise from the ashes, I would tell him to knock that off. If you're going to do something good, it only really counts when nobody knows that you're doing it, in my opinion.
You have to think, though, here's a guy who was on a short list of potential presidents, and he had a resume to die for, and he was smart, good looking, and a great talker, and boom, he collapsed. It would be so hard not to try to make a comeback, and all the people who thought they were buying in early had to be in shock, and they figured, what's a little more money? I mean, why not? I dislike Greitens. I'm not a fan of Greitens, but it's hardly surprising to see him try to take advantage of anything to make a comeback.
Why did he have to go through the Firefighters Foundation? Has anybody
I have no idea, Wendy.
I agree with go ahead.
That's so that the donors could get a tax break.
Well, maybe so. But okay, I'm not a con, but it takes a con to spot one. And let me tell you what, conning, grifting, trying to find a way, as Bill said, to dig your way out of the rubble. What do I always say? You can't put enough chains on somebody from St. Louis that they don't bubble up out the bottom of the river. Look, he's just playing the big con. And how do you do it? All right, I get these masks. And then I go through the Kansas City Police Department, because you can't be mad at the police or the fire department. Plus, a lot of them supported me. I mean, I'm not surprised either, because this is what a con does. This is what a flim-flam man does. and he's just playing every card in the deck, and he's got about 72 of them instead of 52. So okay. I'm not surprised at all. It's almost like it's the book of Khan.
Charlie, I have a slightly different take. First of all, I agree completely with Wendy about the politics of it. But first of all, I want to say one thing, which is good for him that he's doing it, meaning I don't care if Al-Qaeda's given us masks. We need masks. So I think the fact that he's doing it is a commendable thing, actually. I think politically, I thought it was hilarious on a couple of fronts. If you listen to Jenkinson being the fire chief being interviewed, he said he's donating the money. And then he said that Greitens he says, well, he's raised the money. And I thought, well, this is like the best use of dark money that he's ever had done, where he's actually taken it. And it's like almost kind of a Robin Hood thing. But he did, I thought the ironic thing, and again, I don't disagree with Wendy's analysis politically, is he wouldn't talk to the media. Because he obviously wanted to look like he was doing, by the way, he's doing it here, Southeast Missouri, Kansas City, and I think Springfield. This is a tour. If you look on his Twitter page, and that's the thing about it is he's not talking to the media because he doesn't want to look like he's showboating, but he's sharing like Navy SEAL, like hoo-yah and all this to his 85,000 Twitter followers. Yeah. So obviously he's doing it for that reason. It was
pretty interesting, I'll tell you that. And what's next week? Is Steve Stenger going to deliver ventilators? I don't know.
If he could get out,
probably not.
If he could get out, he would have that Patriots plane flying down here.
We would take it. Alvin Reid, I want to ask you about a topic we've covered before, but it was reported by the Post-Dispatch and others that when local judges did release offenders from the jails due to fear of coronavirus, they did release some with violent records, including one who was accused of molesting a young girl. That was in the county. And in the city, a fella who robbed a woman at gunpoint, and the woman was not asked if she had any opinion on the release, nor was the girl or the family in the county involved in the molestation case. And there were other cases involving carjacking and firearms and more where inmates have been released. I mean, this is not good as far as I'm concerned. This is going to make people in greater numbers move to St. Charles. What do you think?
Well, I think there was quite a rush to get this done. And I would say to both prosecutors that maybe the play here would have been like, we don't need to let anybody out until I'm sure several judges or the two judges involved were going to not let any violent criminals out, or at least, alleged violent criminals. Now, in St. Louis County, the poor family finds out that this guy is on the loose from a reporter. I mean, that's inexcusable. And you got to think ahead enough to head that off at the pass. I thought it was rushed into. I'm glad that it is on record that both prosecutors, objected to some of these folks' release. But I mean, by that time, the horse is already out of the barn. And I think we were just in a rush to do this. It's terrible to be in jail at a time like this, but it's no worse than being in a senior residence. Okay. It's where you're at. You're going to have to deal with it.
That's a good
point. I just thought that was a rush. And I'm not surprised at all that this happened. That's why I was fearful of it in the first place.
I don't completely agree because, first of all, the idea of releasing nonviolent folks, particularly those awaiting trial right now, is important for one population that I know Kim Gardner's talked about, who's a former nurse, and that is the people who work in the jails. That we need to protect them. It's not just a matter of protecting the inmates, but which should matter to us, but also the good people who are risking their lives with this tight population. So there's that. The thing that really bothers me about this story is Kim Gardner has released 0 people. Wesley Bell has released 0 people. They have the same ability to get people out of jail that the 5 of us have. The fact is, it's up to judges. And do they make bad judgments sometimes? But when you look at the reporting, for example, Eric, and then you have people like Eric Schmidt piling on, and he looks great doing it because Kim Gardner's unpopular with a lot of people.
Let me step in, Ray.
Bill, out of 10 people that he cited, Kim Gardner had opposed the release of 8 of them.
Okay, Ray, I know you like to defend Kim Gardner, but when Kim Gardner and Wesley Bell push hard for this release, and they pushed very hard for the release of the non-violent prisoners, and all of a sudden, prisoners who shouldn't be released are released, and all of a sudden, well, Kim's got nothing to do with this. Yes, she does. If you make a big deal about you got to let people go,
I agree.
You got to take some responsibility.
Exactly.
What about the judges? The judge doesn't have to accept. Literally.
No, Ray. This is like you.
The defense attorney can come in and beg the judge to let somebody go. They don't have to let anybody go.
Kim Gardner and Wesley Bell were the big movers behind this, and I thought at the time it was a good idea. But you can't just say they're great for doing this, and then when the wrong people get released, say, "Well, Kim's got nothing to do with that."
I didn't say that.
I'm not
saying
a prosecutor.
The judges are the ones doing the releasing.
I'm not a prosecutor, and I said 2 weeks ago that this was a bad idea. Now, I don't have a law degree. I'm not a prosecutor, but if I was, the first thing I would be thinking about is not these poor souls that are in jail, but what if somebody gets out that is not supposed to? So instead of just launching into this, we got to help these people.
Okay.
I would have said,
Charlie, Charlie, you
used
an example of
Bill
the
McClellan,
person.
let me ask you, Bill, about the authorities are asking us as citizens now to turn in people who are not socially distancing, either in large groups or businesses which are open in violation of the state in place guidelines. How do you feel about ordinary citizens dropping a dime on their fellow citizens in this coronavirus crisis?
I've called in on 3 of my neighbors, Charlie. No, I'm teasing. I have really mixed feelings about it. And, you know, if something were really obvious, like if you drove past a park and there was a party going on, I could see somebody saying we ought to alert the authorities. But trying to watch to see if people are keeping their 6-foot distance, I mean, and on the poor police, I wouldn't want to be a cop, you know, answering calls about, you know, they're doing it again. There's 3 of them. Oh, you know, so I'm not very enthused about people calling in on, you know, violations of the social distance.
I think for that very reason that you mentioned, Bill, the fact that the police are, you know, probably busier than ever. I do think that as residents of the city or county, obviously in the county, they're asking us to keep an eye out for businesses that are violating the order to close if they are deemed non-essential, because, you know, it sort of feels like a terrorist attack. And, you know, we're always told back then, if you see something, say something. And so I think that maybe making a call or dropping a dime could save a life, if you will.
Well, I think Hobby Lobby got declared non-essential today, or at least someplace, maybe not everywhere. And I don't really like Hobby Lobby, but I wouldn't drop a dime on Hobby Lobby. I mean,
but they're endangering the lives of people.
I'm with Wendy. Wendy. This is a global pandemic. This isn't like narking on somebody. This is a global pandemic where people who are violating the laws of social distancing, and I don't mean every group of 3 people walking on the street, but in terms of businesses operating in defiance of, you know, the
business is a different thing. I thought this was calling in on your neighbors.
No, part of it was business. Part of it's businesses, and I agree with you, Bill. You're not going to call every time 2 of your neighbors across the street. But the idea, if you see a group gathering or you see a business that's violating the orders at other businesses, Wendy's absolutely right. This is a global pandemic. You are endangering our lives and everybody's.
Well, Bill, what do you think of right now, as of yesterday anyway, the city of St. Louis did release information about those who tested positive and what zip codes they're living in. But I did hear from one St. Louis businessman who has an office in Pittsburgh in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, where they not only release that, but they'll release, for example, the age and the race and the gender of the person who is testing positive. Do you think we need more information locally about that?
Yeah, I do. I think that information is really helpful to people. And I would like to see more information about people's conditions. You know, when you read that it's a 40-year-old man, you'd like to know if he had pre-existing conditions and exactly what they were and where these things are occurring. I know the reporters at the paper are, running around and trying to get as much information as they can. And the city is finally at least giving out zip codes, which is a good thing. But I think the more information, the better, except, I'm not in favor of saying that, so-and-so of and give an address, but like businesses, I think we ought to know what businesses have had employees infected. Sure.
But don't we? I mean, we had this conversation today at the radio station. Deerbergs has announced when any of their anti-guns, so that is happening, right?
Yes, but I think, Wendy, that's right now up to the individual businesses. Like, I don't think that's is it the county health department releasing that?
It might be. I'm not sure.
I stand corrected if that's the case.
Well, I can't.
Any kind of social tracing that can be done, and I agree with you, consistent with people's personal privacy. I don't think we need to be, identifying individual A. But if somebody was out, for example, I think there was a Schnuck store or whatever. It doesn't matter. But I'm saying they've all been real. I think our grocery stores have really been amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Bill,
about a minute to go.
But you have it's good to know.
About a minute to go. What do you think of Josh Hawley, U.S. Senator, Missouri, who is against a bailout for the cruise lines?
Well, I know. I thought you were talking to me. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bill. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as I understand it, he's against giving bailout money to the cruise ships that are registered in other countries, and I think he's right on the money.
Well, I think that like a Walmart is registered in the United States and 75% of the products are from another country. Also, hey, it's a good former St. Louisan. I think he still lives here. Used to be CEO of Carnival, Arnold Donald. So, I don't know if Josh knows there's a St. Louis connection to all this. But look, hey, a cruise ship might be registered someplace else, but millions of Americans pay for cruises and they like to cruise. And I think once again, you're picking on one industry for some reason, and a lot of others are skating. And I just think it's
guys. Because
for once, I'm with Josh.
Cruise line employees are also from other countries.
Ray was with Josh Hawley.
Yeah, because cruise lines aren't even American companies.
I know.
Josh
We're going to call Ripley for the next edition of Believe It or Not. Ray was with Josh Hawley.
One time,
folks. That's all the time we have for this evening's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe. See you next week at this time.
Donnybrook is made possible by the members of the 9 Network.